Hi there my friends, welcome back to my channel. Sorry it's been a while since I've uploaded, but life's been really busy here. I've had family visiting and I've also been helping my youngest daughter set up a handmade business. So yeah, it's all been crazy and busy and just haven't got round to getting any uploads done, so really sorry about that. So I thought we'd do something a little bit different today. So I designed 4 little images on my iPad, printed them off onto a piece of cardstock, and I'm going to be using the Holbein Acrylic Gouache. Now I haven't used acrylic gouache before, so this is completely new to me. This set's got 12 colours. Turn them round, there you go. So I'll just be choosing from these and having a play and see how we go with those. What I'm also going to be using, that I don't very often use, is this. Let me just get the case for it, the packaging. It's a wet palette by Telescopic, and it comes with a tray and a lid and a washable sponge, which is in the wash at the minute, so I've just used a new piece of foam that you use in the kitchen. And it comes with a set of these papers that are disposable, so I thought I'd give that a go as well. Then while I was in my local B&M, I picked up a set of these brushes for £4, and you get 10 brushes, golden tackle bristles. I've just washed the glue out of them. There was a little bit of glue that just needed rinsing out, but for £4 we'll see how they go. So because it's acrylic gouache, I don't want to be using my watercolour brushes with this because it has got the acrylic tendencies in it. So I'll put some colours on the palette and then we'll get painting. And I'll work from left to right, so I'll cover these 3 up and yeah, we'll take it from there. So I'll get some paints onto the palette and I'll see you in a minute. So with everything masked out, I mixed up some of the darker Viridian green colour and started to apply. And right off the go, I have to say that these brushes worked tremendously well. So I can thoroughly recommend them all the way through the painting. They performed really well. I rinsed them out in clean water, didn't need any soaps or anything like that, and the acrylic gouache rinsed straight out. It did stain the larger of the brushes, but apart from that, amazing little brushes for this type of project, I guess. So yep, thoroughly recommend those. So what I did find is working in this acrylic gouache, I just needed to apply a couple of layers to get a really flat colour. Obviously I'm not working on watercolour paper, I'm working on cardstock, so it might alter. The more I use these, I'll experiment more and I'll do some paintings with them on watercolour paper and see what the results are like then. But they were really easy to blend and yeah, just working them up in layers. And these little bookmarks, I just wanted to design them for family and friends really, but I've had a little bit of interest, people wanting them, so it looks like I might get prints done of these and then I can mail them out excuse me, to people that want them. Yeah, cheap and cheerful. So which brings me on to trying a new medium. Now lots of us get bought art materials for birthdays or Christmas and things like that, or sometimes we might see a medium and fancy trying it. And what I do suggest is, if you're trying a new medium, lots of people will say swatch. Well, you can swatch them, which is a good idea if the colour or the value is going to change a lot between dry medium and wet medium. But something like this gouache, I just wanted to jump straight in with a small-ish project. I could have done just one bookmark, but I got carried away in design mode and designed 4. But it really gives you a brilliant feeling of the medium. by just working on a project. And the best thing about gouache and this acrylic gouache, if you make a mistake, just dry it and start layering over the top. Now with traditional gouache, you have got a tendency that you might start reactivating the gouache layers underneath, so you do have to use a light hand. But with this acrylic gouache, once it's dry, it's set. It's, you know, that way it's just like working with traditional acrylics. Once they're on the paper, there's no reactivating them, so you can go over mistakes. As with traditional gouache, these acrylic gouaches can be worked from light to dark or dark to light, depending on your preference. And I go backwards and forwards between the two techniques during painting these bookmarks. So just going around there, I could have done the leaves completely in light green and then gone on and put the little dark green spots on, but yeah, I felt like I'd got all the time in the world, so this was a really relaxing project that I painted over the course of 3 days. So 3 days to do all 4 bookmarks. So just going on there, popping some more light green in, quite self-explanatory, and you can get some really nice effects. You can add drops of water and let the paint disperse a little bit. But as I said at the beginning of the video, I wouldn't use my, you know, top quality watercolour brushes for this gouache. I do use them with normal gouache, but when it comes to this acrylic gouache, then it's a big no, because of the acrylic tendencies within this medium. Going around there, nice and lightly, just popping in that base coat. And at this point I can start adding yellows to the green while they're still wet and getting some really nice effects in. So I dip my brush into different shades of green along the way, just to give it a little bit of vibrancy and so it doesn't look too flat. Now once these acrylic gouaches are dry, they dry just the same as traditional gouache, nice, flat and matte. So very easy to photograph your work afterwards. You can scan your artwork afterwards, and because there's no shine on the paint when it's dry, gives a really nice matte finish to prints as well and photographs. So that's all good as well. So it's all thumbs up. I can tell you right from the off that right the way through this video and through this project of the 4 bookmarks, I had no qualms, no worries, no thumbs down at all of the paint or the paintbrushes or even the piece of cardstock paper. It is acid free cardstock paper, so that's something you want to bear in mind, and the masking tape is acid free as well, so nothing will interfere with the finished product over time. Now using the wet palette that you saw at the very beginning, I hadn't used, well, I can't say I hadn't used it before. I'd used it now and again, but only for sort of little sampling of paints and things like that. So it's tiny amounts. It worked wonderfully. These acrylic gouaches dry really quickly on the paper. They didn't dry out at all on the wet palette. And as I said, I was working on this project on and off over 3 days. And all I'd do at the end of a painting session, I'd just spritz over the wet paints that were on the palette and then just pop the lid on. And the moisture within the sponge underneath the palette paper just kept the paints nice and wet, and they were usable every time I lifted the lid off. So another thumbs up. Oh, this video is all about thumbs up. The sun's shining and it's thumbs up all around. So there, just adding a little bit more wet paint to the top of that one to create a shadow. So just layering up, and as I said, these paints dry so quickly on the paper. I didn't have to wait and go to another leaf and then come back. I could do it all in one sitting. It was brilliant. If you find you want to speed the drying of these paints up even more, you can use a hairdryer. And before going on to this little frog, which is a red-eyed tree frog, I did dry the whole thing with the hairdryer first, just to make sure everything was set and nothing would shift underneath my wet brush. I didn't think it would, but you can never be too careful. I didn't want to spoil this now because I was having so much fun. Obviously, I was pausing now and again to drink coffee. Those that you know me really well know that I do like my cup of coffee, and I do get through quite a few mugs of coffee whilst painting. And then I've got a podcast on or something in the background, because I don't like to work in complete silence. My brain goes on to overdrive then, and I'm looking for mistakes that aren't even there. So I do like a little bit of a distraction. I know some people have a film playing in the background and things like that, or an audio book. I've not tried the audio book in the background, but I think I'd be too distracted by it. So yeah, podcast will do, or a YouTube video, or just some music playing, and that suits me fine. Hope everyone's keeping well. And if you're enjoying the video so far, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps the algorithm. And share it with family and friends, but only if you know that they're going to enjoy this kind of content. So I guess I'm just mixing another colour now, because there's a bit of a pause there. I have sped the video up to 300% in some areas, 250% in other areas, because, you know, yeah, watching paint dry. It's a slow process. These paintings, as I said, took 3 days to complete the whole project, but in reality, well, when I looked at the video content that I actually recorded, there was about 3.5 to 4 hours worth of video content. The main amount of time was taken in designing the bookmarks in the first place, and I just did that with my iPad in Procreate. I don't know if anybody's heard of that. Procreate, on my iPad, on my knee, whilst the TV was on over a couple of evenings. So that probably was the lengthiest part of this project, in just designing them. Whilst I was painting these, I didn't put up any reference images or anything like that. I got a good idea what red-eyed tree frogs look like in coloration and things like that. For the leaves and the bookmarks that are coming after this one, I didn't use any reference images for colours and things like that, because I just wanted it to be part of me, part of who I am. I wanted my personality to shine through my artwork. If you're a creative already, you probably know that feeling where, you know, some colours you feel drawn to, others you don't. And I just decided just to go with my gut instinct and my feeling and how I felt about these paintings and work it up that way. Right, I'm going to take a pause now and let the music play, and you can watch this little frog, who I've named Gorf, because that's frog spelled backwards, come to life. So here we have bookmark number 2. So the leaves are no particular species of tree or anything like that, just a design, simple leaf design that anybody could draw. Just wanted to keep this one simple as well as quite impactful with the colours. Obviously blue and orange are opposites on the colour wheel, so they complement each other. If in a paint scenario something is too blue, you can add a little bit of orange to it to deaden it down, and vice versa, as you can with other opposites on the colour wheel such as red and green. So if a red is feeling too intense, add a little bit of green to it and it just deadens the effect of the red pigment. So background, as you can see, it's going on quite weak and watery. I hadn't got it as such a thicker mixture as I had with the background on the frog bookmark, so I decided I would do a couple of coats again and build up that intensity so it's a nice flat base colour for the background, keeping in mind that I wanted the bookmarks to look like a set. So you could have one bookmark and be happy with it, or you could have 2 bookmarks or 3 or 4 and be happy that they complement each other, that they look like they belong together. Obviously, if you've seen the beginning of the video, you'll see that the bookmark on the furthest most right is of a cross, and that's just a reflection of my faith and one of the things that inspires me to create. But coming back to this, again, the brushes were handling the paint really well, and the paint itself was going on really well. But as you can see there, I just layered up on that tiny portion there straight the way with no shift of the underlying pigment. It really is an amazing paint, and I don't know how many times I can say it, but I thoroughly recommend it. I'm not paid to say this about the paint or the palette or indeed the cardstock paper or the brushes, but everything held up really well. A very pleasing experience for this little project. So just going in there, and I mean, if you wanted a mottled background effect, you could actually leave it like this. It doesn't have to be gone over, you know, a couple of times to create a matte tone background. You know, you might want to do wet into wet and have it look more like a watercolour effect, for instance. But for me, as I said, building up the layers and getting that flat matte effect was something that was working towards throughout the backgrounds of these bookmarks. Now I've watered the paint down quite a lot, and I'm letting the colours merge together. Now, because this medium does dry so very quickly, you do have to work quite quickly. Another thing I noticed it during the frog bookmark, is that because I printed my designs onto cardstock, even though I'd got the design sketched out digitally in grey, when I ran the cardstock through the printer, the lines came out a lot darker. So what I needed to do is, as you can see, I'm working in quite translucent, transparent layers at the moment, and all those lines are really very visible. Now, unlike graphite, I can't go on with an eraser and rub them out, so I'm leaning on the paint to do that work for me and to obscure the lines somewhat for me. And the only way to do that is by using a little bit of opacity in the paints. So what I did to begin with is I went over the leaves with this transparent wash of different colours, and then, as you can see on the finished bookmark to the left of the screen, I went over the lines of this drawing with a more opaque layer. And that way the lines were still there. I could have obliterated them completely by going over them with white, but they were still guidelines for me during the painting of the leaves, so I wanted to leave them in. I just didn't want them to be that bold that they stood out through the paint. So building up your opacity, you can do it a couple of ways. Some colours are naturally more opaque than others, so where the paint colour and pigment was more opaque, all I needed to do was mix up an amount of pigment but with very little water and paint that over the top. Also, you can add white. Obviously that's going to lighten your colour, and you'll need to glaze your finishing colour over the top of that once it's dry. So a couple of ways to go. Some colours, some reds and some yellows, are very transparent by nature, so the ideal thing then would be to mix up a little bit of white with those, and then once that's dry you can glaze your finishing colour on top. All glazing means is painting on a very thin layer of transparent colour to colour, almost stain the colour that is beneath it, so you don't lose any of the shades and shifts in contrast. For instance, when you glaze on top, you just alter the colour of the pigment on the finished painting. And you can go backwards and forwards. If you put a glaze on that you don't like, let it dry. With this medium, takes a couple of seconds. Then go back on with a white or a cream colour, and then you can glaze again until you reach the colour saturation and hue that you require. That was a lot of rambling, so sorry about that. You can tell I've not done this for a while. I've actually just got back from the Apple shop, so at the minute I'm editing with VSDC on a very old computer, and Windows has now informed me that as of October this year, 2025, I'll no longer be getting any security updates and things like that because my computer won't take Windows 11. So I've had enough of Microsoft and Windows. All my other tech is Apple anyway, so I made the decision today to go over to the Apple shop in Liverpool and purchase a mini Mac. So for those of you that don't know Apple, a mini Mac is just a small desktop, but so much more powerful than a 7-year-old PC. Anyway, that's by the by. So from now on I will be video editing with Apple's video editing software. It worked for me before, and it will again. So the videos won't look any different now, it's just a difference in the background of how they're put together. If you want me to work on a project with a certain medium, or a certain medium and a certain subject, just let me know. Just drop it in the comments below and I will add it to my to-do list. I know one lady has asked me to produce a video on airbrushing backgrounds in acrylic or Inktense by Derwent, so that will be coming soon. onwards and upwards. So getting the base coat layers now going on the butterfly. And the reason I've stepped away now from doing the leaves is obviously that looks so different to the finished bookmark, is I want to keep a balance on the leaves. So there you can see the leaves. So I added another more opaque layer to disguise those sketch lines, digital sketch lines. And now I can concentrate on the butterfly and building up the vibrancy and contrast to match the leaves in the background. Now obviously there's not a lot of contrast in the leaves, meaning if you don't know what contrast is, it's how dark your darks are compared to how light your lights are. And there's not a lot of contrast in the background. If you squint your eyes, or if we were to take the finished painting of this bookmark to grayscale, there wouldn't be a huge shift from lights and darks for the background. But when you start to add the darks to the butterfly, it helps it pop, because that contains a lot of contrast. And just by doing that, the contrast of the butterfly in comparison to the contrast of the background makes the butterfly pop even more. If we had lots of darks and lots of lights in the background as well as the butterfly, the effect of the butterfly would be lessened. So building up the layers now again, adding a little bit of yellow to that pinky orange that I've just laid down. But as you can see, the pinky orange colour underneath had already dried practically in the blink of an eye. So I decided I would let it dry, and I think I probably dried it off with a hairdryer, and come back to it once it's dry and start adding the colours that I actually want there. Now the colour I'm applying to the butterfly's body to start off with is green, and that's a mixture of the blue that's in the background and the green that is on the leaves, just so everything feels cohesive, everything feels nice together, like they belong. And now using one of these wonderful brushes, applying a little bit of burgundy colour, and slowly but surely I decide to take this colour a little bit darker, and it ends up pretty much being black. And it's all about playing. If you haven't got your art materials out and just played with them, you don't have to show anybody the results. Use a sketchbook, use some scrap paper, but just have a play, and you'll start to really surprise yourself with what your mediums that you already have can do. Even if it's just graphite pencils and I don't know, an old brown paper bag, if you start playing with your materials, you'll learn so much more than any book or video or workshop or tutorial could ever teach you. Because you could come to one of my workshops, which I do run, and you could listen to every word I say and watch every stroke of a brush or pencil that I make, but until you put brush or pencil to paper, you won't be learning very much at all. It's putting all of the things you think you know and the things that you definitely do know into action. That's where the fun is, and that's where you start to grow. I think it's a little bit like learning to drive. When you're out with your driving instructor, and yeah, you can go through all of your lessons and pass your test, but you don't really learn how to drive until you're out in a car on your own. It sounds scary, but you already know all the techniques of driving. They've already been taught to you. You've already passed your driving test, so your competence is there, but the knowledge comes from actually putting that into practice and going out and driving on your own. And exactly the same with art. Okay, so I've mixed up some quite thick white pigment there, and I'm just using a nail art tool just to apply little dots. I do this for a while, and then when I want the bigger dots, I go in with the smallest of the brushes. So it's just another way of applying paint. And even these little blobs of paint dried almost instantly. And it's just a nice way of getting a little bit of detail onto a very little bookmark. These bookmarks are quite small. So when you don't think it's working, dab it twice. And make sure you've picked up enough paint on the end of your nail tool. If you're looking to get these nail tools, they normally come in sets. Don't look for the art ones because they'll charge you twice as much. Just nip onto Amazon and somewhere like that, eBay, and just look for nail art tools, and you'll pick a pack of these up for like £5, something like that. Really, really cheap, and you can use them for so many different things. So back in with a brush now. I just want a smear of white running down the body of this little butterfly. It looks a bit like a monarch butterfly, but that wasn't really intentional when I sketched it out. But the more I thought about the structure of the butterfly and the colours that I wanted to use, then it was the monarch butterfly that came to mind. Unfortunately, we don't get this species of butterfly in the UK, but we do have some spectacular ones. Anyway, so a little bit different for this bookmark. Having decided through the past 2 bookmarks that it was a bit of a pain weaving the background colour in and out of the different aspects of the design, I decided just to go for it and cover this whole design with yellow. It was sort of like a golden yellow colour that I'd mixed up. Let it dry, and then let a little bit of this colour shine through the other colours I was putting on top. And as you can see from the finished bookmark on the left, I think it turned out quite nice, with a friendly little bumblebee. So just going in, working gently round the petals, filling in the background. So I did go in with 2 coats of the red, again to create that nice flat base coat layer. So once the base coat layer was on and dried, I started applying different tones of pink to the petals of the flower at the top. Again, this is no specific species of flower, just out of my imagination. So they've got sort of a daisy-like look about them, but the colours are completely made up. Now you're probably wondering why I'm going one petal, miss a petal, and then one petal. That comes from my knowledge of watercolour, which doesn't really apply to this, but I'll go with it. If in watercolour, when working in watercolour, if you paint two petals that are next to each other, the likelihood is the pigments will bleed across and contaminate, each other. So my idea was that while this paint was wet, it might bleed into the area next to it if I was to apply wet paint there. So I started off by going one petal, miss a petal, one petal, miss a petal. You get the idea. But yeah, it wouldn't have mattered, I don't think, at all. I could have done the petals next to each other. I don't think this paint was staying wet enough for long enough for the bleed through to happen. So yeah, just bear with me. Like I said, this is a medium I hadn't used before, so it's a learning process. We will never know everything there is to know about art. Never. We will never create a perfect painting. Practice makes progress, as I've said in videos before, not perfection. If I was to create a painting and couldn't critique it once finished, if I thought every painting I did was perfect, what would be the point in creating anything else? The challenge would be gone. Yeah, the headaches would be gone as well, but the challenge would be gone. So whenever I create something, I'm learning, and that's the joy of art, is it's a never-ending learning curve. During the learning process, you learn how to do things. You also learn how not to do things. When something goes the way you didn't want it to, it can be a happy accident sometimes, but if it causes trouble, then you need to find a way out of that trouble, and that's all part of the learning process as well. Because if we never make inverted whatever speech marks or whatever they're called, if we never make mistakes, then we could find ourselves in the position of getting towards the end of a very good painting or project, making a mistake and then not knowing how to fix it, and that would be so sad. If you got all the way to, if you'd done 98% of a painting and you were completely happy with it, and then you did something and didn't know how to rectify what you just did, that would be a nightmare, because the chances are you could attempt to rectify the mistake and ruin, maybe not all of the painting, but some of the painting in the process. And then you've got to find a way of rectifying that as well. And these problems just seem to domino then. You get it like a domino effect, they start piling up. Whereas if you play with your materials and you think, well, if I do that and I do that, then this happens. So if this happens, how do I get back from that? And you start, rectifying problems from a very early stage in your art career, art practice, then the likelihood is in the future you're less likely to make big mistakes because you've made them in the past and hopefully learn from them. And if you do, hidden away in your brain will be the solution. So don't be afraid to try new mediums, don't be afraid to go wrong, because going wrong and putting those wrongs right is all part of the process too. Okay, so the base coats are more or less in the flower petals now. Now, as you can see, looking at the finished painting on the left, I do end up going over with a really thin down layer of a pink wash. So I glaze the petals with a very translucent layer of the acrylic gouache. And when I mean thin down, I really mean it's just like tinted water, and it just tints the whites. It doesn't take away any of the detailing that I've already put in, so there's no wasted work or anything like that. But I just wasn't happy with how bright these petals were looking. I just wanted them to be dulled down slightly. And the reason being, I guess, is because the red of the background in this particular bookmark is quite dark. It's quite a dark tone of red. And with the white petals, or the very light pink petals, there was just too much contrast. And as I was saying about the butterfly bookmark, I wanted more contrast to be in the butterfly, and in this particular bookmark I wanted more contrast to be in the bee than in the background, and just to give it a little bit of a more added effect, a bit more of a punch. So just going in on the leaves now, getting a base coat layer down to cover up some of the yellow. The yellow still shines through because I'm not using an opaque colour, and the layering I'm doing is quite thin. And then I can add different colours on top of that, and as you can see now, the sketch lines on the leaves have virtually disappeared. I can see them when I hover my head right over the painting, but from this angle you can only just see them, which was great. So I knew that none of the sketch lines were going to be visible towards the end of the painting. I'm moving on to the inside part of the flowers. Just decided that a stippling effect would work best for this. I didn't want to put any detail in as such. I wanted whatever detail there was going to be on the bee. So just a very light hand, quite diluted paint, and just stippling on some darks, some lights. I do believe I worked practically always on on this part, dark to light. Can't get my words out. Oh, that makes a change, shouts everybody. Yeah, well known for waffling. Yeah, so pretty much working dark to light on these. So wetted that area, there just clean water, and then applied a little bit of a darker pigment, a darker orangey pigment. By this time my palette was a mishmash of colours, so I was just, picking up whatever was nearest, because as said, if you don't like a colour you can alter it later on. When it's dry you can go over it, so not a problem. So stippling just means like a little dabbing action. So probably cleaning my brush off there. And by this time that one at the top is pretty much dry, even though I did use quite a bit of water on it, and going in with a mid-tone. Just being careful to go round the lines of the bee. So even though I'd put that base coat layer of yellow on, it wasn't opaque. No, it wasn't that opaque that it covered up the lines completely, which is a good thing. So I did need guidelines for the bee. The flowers and leaves, not necessarily required. I could have sketched them back in. And then on with a lighter colour to finish the inside of the flowers where the little stamens are. So these are all little tiny stamens, I'm assuming, in the middle of these flowers. That's what I had in my mind. And just working backwards and forwards between lights and darks, just to get the shadowed area around this part of the flowers. Okay, so as you can see, I decided to take the petals dark again, just with a glaze. So I mixed up a nice transparent wash of colour and just proceeded to glaze over all of the petals. And then when that wash was dry, just add a little bit of highlighting again. And you can go backwards and forwards as much as you want doing this, glazing, detailing, glazing, detailing, or glazing, going on with opaque medium and glazing again. So it's not like coloured pencil or anything like that where you're going to run out of tooth on the paper or anything like that, as the paint, the dried paint, is the tooth. And so you can layer up forever. You know, you could paint like this for years until your painting was 5 inches thick. You know, you could just go on and go on. As long as you're letting the underlying layers dry completely, then you can just layer after layer after layer, and it's so much fun. It really is. So that's what I did. I just layered up until I got the result that I was after, and that was not as bright as it was. There you go. And onto the bee. So again, I used all the same techniques that you've seen throughout these first 3 bookmarks, starting off with nice thin layers, working up in slightly thicker layers, and working most of the time dark to light. So just keeping a steady hand, making sure that I stay within those guidelines that are there, because if anything goes out of that guideline, then I've got to go back in and rectify it before moving on. I like to get things sorted out as soon as I see them, because I might forget if I don't. So I didn't really go on dark enough there, but that's fine. So I go on dark there. So as you can see, it dries so quickly. You know, you can change your mind in a minute and it's already dry. You can already alter colours and things like that. It's lovely medium. Yeah, thoroughly worth having a go if you haven't tried one already. And most of the well-known brands, you can buy things open stock, which means you can buy just 1 tube of colour, you can buy 1 pencil, things like that, and it just gives you a little excuse for some playtime, for some you time. So going in there with burgundy colour, and it's pretty much the burgundy colour that I use throughout this little bee, and then I start to darken it when I need areas to show more depth in the hair. You know, everybody say, oh, bees look furry. They do actually, don't they? But it's hair. So just getting that depth into the hair, but starting off with a mid-tone and then working lighter and then adding the darks in. So as I said earlier, you can go backwards and forwards, dark to light or light to dark. It's completely up to you, whichever way you feel easier. Just putting some veining into the wings there, and it went on a little bit too dark, but that's fine because I can go over it. I already know that the lines can be gone over, the printed lines of the bookmarks can be gone over with an opaque layer. So I know that these little lines, if they go on too dark, I can go over them with a thin down opaque layer, and they will be visible, but not as visible as they were when they first went on. Okay, and on to the final bookmark. Last but definitely not least is the cross with the palm fronds that I designed. And what I did was I coated the whole bookmark area with a teal colour, so I just mixed one of the blues with one of the greens and a little bit of white to create this semi-opaque layer. Painted the whole of the bookmark, and as you can see the lines are still visible just, but because I didn't want to lose them completely, I started painting in all those little palm frond leaves just so I knew where they were, and it worked out really well because all I needed to do was paint them all white, and then I just added a little glaze of red and orange to them, and the palm leaves were done, which was really nice. Didn't take long at all, and some of the edges weren't as clean on the leaves that I hoped they'd be, so all I did was, using the remainder of the background colour, just went in between the leaves and just tidied things up a bit. Don't think it made that much difference, but I knew the little uneven lines were there and just wanted to rectify that before moving on to painting the cross. So nice steady hand, just working around the cross and working in these little leaves. And this paint was drying really quick, so I didn't get one smudge on my hand or anything like that, even though I was hovering above them. Obviously trying not to touch them just in case there was a blob of paint or something, but if I'd have smudged one, best thing to do is just let it dry and then paint over and around it. Job done. So that's all of them in. So next step, base coat layer onto the cross. All I did was use one of the oranges that I'd mixed for the bee painting, thinned it right down, and then just put a light wash over the area of the cross and let some of the background colour show through. And you can't really see it in the finished painting, but some of the background colour is actually some of the colour in the cross. You can see it, it's not blaringly obvious, but it's still there, which is really nice because it makes the painting feel whole as a whole. So there you can see that I've glazed the palm fronds. The oranges aren't showing up really well on the palm frond leaves, but on the painting, on the video bit, but on the finished painting you can see where the tinges of orange are on the leaves and where the reds are on the leaves too. So just getting that feeling of a wooden cross now. I didn't want it to look like a cardboard cutout just stuck on. I wanted it to look semi-realistic, and that means just building up layers and creating texture. So not physical texture, there's no texture to this paint at all when it's dry, it's completely flat, but getting a visual texture so it looks like wood. And the only really way, I'm doing it again, the only way to achieve that is going in with multiple layers, making sure my brush strokes are going in the correct direction of the wood. So verticals for the downward part and horizontals for the horizontal part of the cross. And then just letting the brush skip over some of it. So you don't want one line running from the top of the cross right the way down to the bottom, or one side of the cross straight over to the other, but just to let the brush skip and play on the paper, but moving your hand in the direction that you want the finish marks to go. I hope that makes sense. And just working light to dark, and I did add a little bit of glazing, which is, as you know by now, tinting a translucent colour over a dried existing one, and just building up the layers until I was happy with the results. And just keeping my eyes on him and remembering that in this particular painting, the light source for the cross is coming in from the top left. So anything on the right and definitely bottom right would be darker. So I'll let the music play. Thank you everybody for watching so far, and the video has about 4 minutes left. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe and leave comments below, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. I need a coffee, I need a rest. And I will leave you with this one playing till the end. Take care everybody. Bye bye for now.